What's it going to take for a team in Texas to win the SEC conference? Well, the offseason is where championship runs are made, and today we're going to talk Texas and Texas A&M in the transfer portal. Have they done enough? But before we get going, hit subscribe for me. We talk recruiting, we talk transfer portal. It's 365 days out of the year, all recruiting all the time. Hit subscribe for me, please. All right. Let's bring on threes Jerry Hamilton, and we'll start with the Longhorns, Jerry, in the portal. They've added Matthew Golden from Houston, safety Andrew Makuba from Clemson, and edge Trey Moore from UTSA. Now, Jerry, Matthew Golden, he's on board, but we know Texas wants more wide receivers. How many more do they need, and you got any names for me?
Yeah, I think they'll take at least one more out of the portal. I think 2 is pretty much the number. Obviously, Matthew Golden, he kind of fills – he's also a kickoff return guy, so he feels something there, as well as wide receiver. C.J. Daniels, the Liberty transfer, visited Texas last weekend after visiting Auburn and Florida in the previous 3 days. He's probably the name to know right now. We'll see if anybody else jumps in the portal. There's also Silas Bolden at Oregon State, who may make a visit to Texas this weekend if C.J. Daniels doesn't have a decision. There's been a little quiet confidence in the last 24 hours out of Austin on C.J. Daniels. We'll see if that comes true, because obviously Liberty is still trying to get him to go back to school as well, like Caden Salter, the quarterback, did. But C.J. Daniels is the main name to know right now.
Yeah, the portal's crazy. I mean, you got Texas, you got UF, you got Auburn, but you also got to battle Liberty as well. So who knows what's going to happen with C.J. Daniels?
And just national title game just ended. Guys have 9 days to go in from the national title game. Who knows who's going in?
Yeah. And now let's talk about 2 guys that they've already landed, and that is Trey Moore, who's an edge, and then on defense you also have safety Andrew Makuba from Clemson. Are these additions starting line caliber players? They're going to come in and compete for a starting job, or are they depth pieces for Texas?
I think all 3 of those guys are starting level players for Texas in the SEC. We talked about Golden. He also brings the kick return game. He scored 2 touchdowns against Texas this year. Very talented. Teammate of Jaden Blue at Klein Cain. But then you kind of look at Andrew Makuba. Yeah, absolutely. I believe he'll be a starter for Texas next year. The question is whether that's at nickel or is it safety. He's a guy with 150 tackles in his career at Clemson. He's played in a lot of big games, played against a lot of talent in neutralized situations. As a guy that's on NFL draft boards, he's absolutely, I think, is going to be penciled in as a starter at Texas. Trey Moore, if you watch the Washington game, Texas has to get edge pressure.
Yes.
And you're talking about one of the top sack guys in the country at UTSA. He's a little bit undersized, maybe doesn't have the ideal arm length in the SEC that you want, but he's so twitchy. I think he's going to bring pass rush off the edge along with freshman Colin Simmons that Texas was lacking last year.
Is there another need to fill beyond wide receiver for Texas right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Defensive line. Jamari Caldwell, the Houston transfer, visited last weekend. It's down to Texas and Oregon. Oops, Bo Davis just took the LSU D-line job. So what's going to happen there? You got to figure it's not Texas. Then there's linebacker, inside linebacker, with Jalen Ford departing for the NFL. You know, Kendrick Blackshire, the Alabama transfer, scheduled to visit Austin and Texas this weekend. An experienced adult in the room at inside linebacker is a need for Texas if after Blackshire visits he meets what they're looking for. So continue to look at wide receiver, defensive line, and linebacker.
All right, let's check in on the Aggies right now. They've had some big portal additions themselves, led by edge Nick Scorton out of Purdue, corner Will Lee, Cassius Howell from Bowling Green, Jabari Barber from Troy, and Dorian Hinton, a big offensive lineman from FAU. Did the Aggies add SEC caliber transfers in your opinion?
I think the jury's out on some of those guys, but I like what they've done in terms of kind of replenishing what they had to in the roster. Look, Scourton, who used to go by Nick Carraway coming out of Bryan High right down the road from A&M, he was almost a must-get for Texas A&M. When you look at Fadil Diggs and Walter Nolan leaving, transferring out of the program, then Isaiah Rakes, I mean, they took some massive hits on a tremendous defensive line. So Scourton is absolutely an SEC-level starting player. He's a guy that'll be an NFL player one day. That was a big pickup for them. Then you look down the wide receiver Barber. He's a guy who is he's a speedy guy with long arms. I think they need some of that speed. Obviously, Evan Stewart bouncing and leaving in the portal, that takes away a speed guy for Texas A&M. So Barber, I think, helps replace that. Offensive line is where, Mike Elko, whether it's through the portal, whether it's through high school recruiting in these next couple of classes, they got some work to do. Getting Chase Besantis to stay was key for them. We'll be interested to see if they move him inside or keep him at right tackle. But Hinton, at least, they can plug a little bit on the offensive line. Because last year it was a sieve at times, and they had to get some adults, some experienced guys in the room on the offensive line in this transition year. I think they've addressed some needs. Obviously, Jake Johnson's a big loss at tight end. They had some guys that were hard to replace, but I think they've done a good job. Will Lee's a lengthy corner. I'll tell you what they've done. They've taken a number of safeties. Mike Elko came into Texas A&M and obviously thought there was a real depth issue at safety. Obviously, Bryce Anderson's back, Jacoby Matthews, two really good players that are going to be juniors, but there was not depth behind them, and they've done a good job addressing that.
All right. And you mentioned a lot going out, a lot coming in. I think Texas A&M's total right now is at 21. I know they're over 20. So my question to you is Mike Elko flipping the roster, or is the roster flipping on him?
Can that be both? I mean, that's a great question, Josh. I mean, I think some of the guys that leave, I think you're okay with at times because you're going to come in, you're going to reestablish your culture, build things the way you feel like they need to be built versus how they were. And that's not an indictment on anybody. That's when any new coach comes in. But I think he's flipping the roster to have a chance to steady the ship next year and the year after. I think that's the main thing. Building through the high school level is still going to be key for him in the 25 and 26 classes. But I think what he's done right now is steady the ship, because for a while there, I think Texas A&M fans are like, what are we even going to look like next year? So at least now they have a picture of a guy that has a plan, and he's hired a quality staff, and now they're going to execute that plan. So I think he's kind of keeping things steady right now. He's getting some guys he likes on defense. They're going to fit his scheme, which I think is underrated when you look at where players transfer from.
All right. Now, at the beginning of the video, I posed the question, what's it going to take for a team from Texas to win the SEC? And at this point, I don't think it's really fair to put those expectations on Texas A&M. Like you said, Mike Elko's there to stabilize right now, not to win the SEC. I mean, that would be great. But has Texas done enough this offseason? Is the transfer portal, recruiting, have they done enough this offseason to win the SEC?
I think they still have some holes to fill now. I mean, with Jatavion Sanders going pro at tight end, he's a tough guy to replace for Texas. I mean, he's a downfield after-the-catch threat. There just aren't many of those guys. They're high draft picks in the NFL. So could Texas also take a portal tight end in the spring? That's something to watch as well. I think they've done enough through a third straight top 5 recruiting class. I think they'll end up with 5, 6, 7 guys out of the portal. They have 3 right now. I think they'll do enough to where they're going to be competing in that league next year for sure. I think they have too much talent at quarterback, an offensive line that's going to be experienced and older. So a lot of talented young guys coming in, some young guys at linebacker that Texas fans have seen Anthony Hill, but not some of the other guys. I think Texas is going to be right there to compete. Do they have the roster talent level of Georgia or Alabama next year? I think they're going to be a little bit cut below that as of right now.
Well, portal's not closed yet. There's still coaching change happening. There's still some 2024 recruiting going on. There's a lot to happen still. Jerry Hamilton, thank you for dropping by today on the Inside Scoop.
You got it.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that content, be sure to subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We have a new page dedicated only to recruiting. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now.